This is the lecture video, pages 323 through 337. Starting out with the temperance movement. And they had the greatest impact of any reform movement. We talked about this in class, how the idea pre-temperance movement about alcohol versus the idea of post-temperance movement all the way till today is a big difference. The goal of the temperance movement is to radically change American attitudes towards alcohol and its role in social life, and to that extent, they win. They do exactly what they want to do. First wave of temperance converts comes from the upper and middle class as they're connected to self-discipline, pursuit of business successes, and then eventually it'll start morphing more into the women aspect. The domestic ideal of cult of domesticity stimulated the first phases of reform activities by women. We talked about them. We talked about women in general before, how they were part of the temperance movement, but they also help out with widows and orphans. And then the second phase goes after prostitution and stresses moral reform in that manner. And the women's movement really takes off. The benevolent empire, if you remember from last lecture video, is the reforming moral society in America. Was harshly criticized by revivals and grassroots sects because they didn't do enough. And these grassroots sects that follow individual preachers, they really criticize them for not doing enough. One of the big main groups that you're going to need to remember that we're going to talk about in length coming up here in the next couple sections is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons. They represent the most enduring backlash against the middle-class evangelicals, founded by Joseph Smith. This organization, the Mormons are different, and we'll get more into how they are different a little bit later. Before the 1820s, schooling in America is terrible. It was informal, haphazard. There's no money for schools. And then the working man's movement comes about in northern cities and issues the first call for tax-supported schools. And so now we have tax money being able to fund that. Horace Mann comes in, and you'll need to remember him as the educational reformer. And he works in Massachusetts, in New England, in most northern states, and stresses the need for state governments to impose centralized control over standards, over schools, what they're going to do, how they're going to be, and that is followed through today, where each state has their own standards, or the Common Core standards that some have developed and used. Over half of the white children between 5 and 19 years of age were enrolled in school in 1850. That is obviously a low number. That we need to get that number. That number is going to keep growing up and up and up. Reformers focused their attention also on developing a host of new institutions to deal with social problems: penitentiaries, orphanages, mental hospitals, reformatories, anything to help out the people that can't help themselves. Prisons, to have a standard of a prison where it needs to be. They believe that the environment around said individuals helped shape a person's character. It provided an environment that would promote discipline and moral character. They see this for the workhouses, so that the poor can get out of the workhouses. For the insane, the mentally ill, that they can get out of these mental hospitals. The whole idea isn't to keep them there forever, but to help them become productive members of society again. Now, of course, some do stay in the mental hospitals, but at least there's some reform, there's some order. It's not just some haphazard thing thrown together at the last minute. Dorothea Dix brought her crusade to the mental health reform. You need to remember her for her work with the insane asylums or mental hospitals. All right, so utopian societies, we talked at length about these in class. A utopian society is a perfect society. And the most successful utopian communities were religious sects that reordered gender and economic relations, kind of just turn everything up on their head. They go against capitalism. The Shakers espoused communism and celibacy, so they go out there and dance, cut a rug, Shakers, but they're also celibate, so they can't uh, procreate, have sex to um, grow their Shaker organization because of celibacy. But then celibacy, so you're saying you can't grow, you have to keep recruiting, and in order to recruit, you have to tell people they can't have sex, and that's not a real big calling card or a big idea. Other utopian communities include Oneida in upstate New York, New Harmony in Indiana, Brook Farm in Massachusetts. Oneida had plural marriage, where everybody, communal raising of children. New Harmony in Indiana um, used Robert Owen. He's a wealthy Scottish man as their leader. Brook Farm is basically what it is. It's a farm, and it centers on nature and the individual. And this is where kind of transcendentalism comes about, and we see some of the American writers in the Renaissance of that. Nathaniel Hawthorne, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson was dubbed "Shot Heard Around the World." Um, he dubbed that term for the American Revolution. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote the Scarlet Letter, so things that you've all been involved in and know. Um, Abolitionism. The initial thrust of anti-slavery reformers initially was the colonization of Africa. Let's send them all back to Africa, and they actually set up Liberia. But there's not a whole lot of success because freed African Americans say, wait a second, we're like fourth or fifth generation American now. We don't need to move on and go back to a place in Africa. This is, I told you that it's very similar to that of John Ross and the Cherokee Indians. They don't want to go someplace where they're not wanted. They don't know the customs. They don't know the language. They don't know the land. Why would they want to go? So that's why, again, um, freed African Americans reject going back to Africa. Now, the William Lloyd Garrison, okay, and a lot of you messed this up on the quiz, but William Lloyd Garrison was the founder and figure in early abolitionism. Okay, he founded the newspaper The Liberator and also helped found the American Anti-Slavery Society. This doesn't have to do with colonization. Okay, this has to do with abolitionism, getting rid of slavery. Okay, not moving the freedmen back to Africa. And the American Anti-Slavery Society used any means necessary revivalist exhortation, speeches, rallies, paid lectures, children's games, and print to try to spread their anti-slavery message. They considered themselves social agitators. They had enlisted 200,000 Northerners that were caused by 1840s, but then in response to this, anti-abolitionists, those that opposed the freeing of the slaves, used mob violence to oppose the abolitionists. And so we have this big kind of conglomeration of things that are going on here. And the abolitionists, even though they see themselves as social agitators, they're not going to use mob violence, where the anti-abolitionists will. Okay. And you can see here the abolitionist movement using any means necessary with the slogan, any holder but a slaveholder, embroidered on these potholders. I mean, it's just they don't care how it gets out there. They just want it out there saying that slavery is no, 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 no. We need to get rid of it. And again, they want to get rid of it right now, right now, right now. Now, that may not be the case all the way. We're going to see some instances where that is kind of changed a little bit here in a little bit. Let's see here. Okay. I'm going to jump over women really quick. Many abolitionists believe that emancipation could be achieved by moving abolitionism into the American political mainstream. John Quincy Adams, who was a president, becomes a congressman again after being president, championed the right to petition this to Congress to end slavery. But they want to end it right now, and that's just not going to happen. That's just going to hurt the South way too much. But in 1840, the Liberty Party is formed to oppose expansion of slavery in any of the new territories that we have. Excuse me. We're going to get some after the Mexican-American War, but any of the new territory that's left in the Louisiana Purchase, the Northwest Territory, all that stuff up there that we haven't settled yet, and they want to oppose slavery there, condemn racial discrimination. Some abolitionists began promoting the idea of slave power. Well, that's not going to stick. That's too quote unquote scary for the white people. All right, going back to the women's movement, this grows out of abolitionism. They see themselves as similar and compared their plight to the status of slaves to the status of women. So the beginnings of this is Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton have the first National Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, in upstate New York. In Seneca Falls, upstate New York, repeated that, in 1848. And they come up with the Declaration of Rights of Settlement, or the Declaration of Rights of Women, either way, remember, and it calls for the full female equality, including the right to vote. This is in 1848, guys. 71 years later is when they get the right to vote. We're in 2019, and women do not have full equality. There is no such thing as an equal rights amendment. So very, very interesting on some of the things that are going on here in America as it pertains to women's rights. That's all I have for you.